This is Dr. Charles Parker, and you're listening to Core Brain Journal. It's a place where I connect both fresh discoveries and interesting different perspectives from advanced mind science with the realities of real people and everyday life down on Main Street. Well, welcome, folks. Here we are, Dr. Charles Parker at Core Brain Journal one more time. And today we have another interesting guest. This person is going to put a little bit of a punctuation mark on a theme that we've been very interested in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, what happens with trauma. And today we're joined by Dr. Monica Powers. Welcome, Monica. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Monica, I'm going to read a little bio on her, just as we do, and then we're going to have Monica tell us a little bit more about the angle of how she got into this, and she's going to introduce a new word for us, and I'm looking forward to learning about this word with you, which has something to do with how people respond to the stress and their inherent abilities to manage stress. We'll talk about that. So, Dr. Monica Powers is a California native who recently relocated from the high desert to down by the ocean, Orange County, to continue her work with Sovereign Health. We've interviewed two other individuals from Sovereign Health, Dr. Anthony Mealy at 077 Core Brain Journal, and Dr. Tanmoy Sharmi, who is the, I think he's the CEO, medical director. He is the clinical person in charge of all their various hospitals around the country. So we're looking forward to hearing Monica. So back to it. So she obtained her doctorate at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, where she focused her interests on, this is the word, my friends, resilience of survivors of natural disasters, and spent time and wrote about Hurricane Katrina survivors. So she has been out there where the road got very muddy, folks, and we're looking forward to hearing about her. She also works in a small private practice on weekends, where she works with a variety of patients in personal psychotherapy. So that's a brief introduction, Monica. Tell us a little more about yourself personally, please.
Well, interestingly, I have no ties to Katrina, but I am someone who is an avid traveler. And part of the reason I chose this topic is because I wanted to be able to go somewhere and look at something. So as somebody who is a traveler, I thought it was important to be able to take a trip and look at a different kind of culture. I also am the mom of two dogs. I had three, but recently I lost one, which was really sad, and something also that speaks to the need for resilience. I have a brother who lives a few miles away, and yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Well, you're covering the bases. You got a personal life, you got a practice, and you're really working in a very difficult environment, because I've worked as an executive medical director in a psych hospital, and I know as the director of clinical development, you have a very, very large responsibility on your shoulders with a large organization like Sovereign Health. How do you actually do that? Do you spend some time in the various, they have 9 hospitals in country here?
Yeah, we have 8 locations. So I do spend, I have spent time at each of the facilities, with the exception of 2. One of them, I actually sent somebody most recently. But essentially, I help to do the setup of the facilities, the initial hiring I do, and I'm responsible for the training of the site training directors for clinical, as well as the program directors for clinical. So I help, along with Dr. Mealy, who you interviewed prior, to set the clinical tone, policies, and procedures, and ensure that they are working on a global perspective like clockwork. I also have a large responsibility to the training on the clinical end in ensuring that across the site, the clinicians are trained in the items that we think are necessary for treatment of our patient populations, as well as the training programs that we connect with for both doctoral, postdoctoral, and practicum training. So we interact with a number of schools at all the facilities in providing practicum internship opportunities, and I'm involved in that as well.
Wow, you're a busy woman. So let's take a deep,
Yes.
deep dive. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said yes. Yes, I am.
Sorry about that. We were talking earlier. I can't quite hear her as well as she can hear me, and I messed around with my machine for a while, folks. So I may have to interrupt her a little bit just because I don't entirely get it. Thank goodness we have some good production people at Studio One who can get in there and make some changes. So we'll get that done. We can always bring her volume up, and I know it won't be a problem for you. Back to you, Monica. So tell us, let's dive right into this concept of resilience, because a number of people are going to be listening to this who are really quite experienced and interested in either their personal experience of overcoming issues with post-traumatic stress, combat stress, personal stress, life stress, are who help others who have these issues. So tell us, please, about your doctorate and the resilience. Was that the topic for your doctoral thesis?
Yes. So I initially became interested in the topic when I was looking for something to study for my dissertation. It happened to be around the same time that there was a Grey's Anatomy episode that spoke to the topic or the area of resilience. There had been a shooting in the hospital and people had died, and the people who lived had to attend a group therapy until they were cleared by their medical or the mental health community within the hospital. So with that specific story in mind, as well as my interest in sort of mass trauma situations, whether it be natural disaster or public terrorism, anything of that sort of nature has always been somewhat interesting to me. And so that is how I essentially arrived at my topic. When I was trying to decide what I wanted to study within the idea of resilience within a community, I considered veterans, I considered people who had experienced a mass disaster situation or a mass trauma situation, so like a 9/11 experience, an Oklahoma bombing experience, something of that nature. And I settled on Katrina because I had interacted with someone who had an experience living through Katrina and had lived in New Orleans at the time, and essentially picked her whole family up and moved to California and didn't look back. There was no, they had lost everything, and her and her husband and her two children, and basically started life over. And that was a fascinating construct to me, that someone would be able to get through that, muddle through. And she had, in New Orleans, had a hair shop and had owned a jewelry business. She came out here and became a substance abuse counselor. And she would tell us the story of how she had sort of, dealt with this. And, she went to school, and she explained that on the drive to school, actually, she took the train. She'd cry all the way there and all the way back. But then when she got into class, she would, sort of button it in and deal with what she had to do. And then, release when she needed to. And that whole idea of how she had sort of gotten through this really large scale experience, not just her family too, they were teenage or adolescent age children. And so what their experiences were as well, that was such an interesting construct for me that I really wanted to look at what her experience was and understand her lived experience, because she was somebody who I would certainly categorize as a resilient person.
Sounds so interesting. I have a friend at the gym who Virginia Beach has run off their fire department and their first responders to a number of these traumatic episodes. Oklahoma, the Pentagon crash on 9/11, and Katrina. And I'm looking forward to have him on because he has a unique perspective, and you may want to comment on this, regarding the trauma of first responders who weren't there for the experience, but nevertheless have significant problems as first responders to the to the scene, as it were.
I absolutely agree that that is something that takes place. It's generally called secondary trauma. Therapists often experience this with patients that they work with that might have really serious traumatic backgrounds. For example, long-term sexual or physical abuse, or any really serious traumatic experiences that and if they work with a large population that sort of really specifically honed in on people with those backgrounds, that hearing that it is a secondary trauma, and it can be very difficult to sort of find your way out of that and not have to take all of that home with you every day. It can be really difficult. And they also say that sort of secondary trauma, this is more transgenerational, but for people who have lived through something and then their family members take it on. So people who lived through the Holocaust, for example, their family often experiences a transgenerational trauma of experiencing that trauma that lived so much within their family member, especially if they were close, because you can imagine that, the stories that they heard, and then, you take that on. Everything that you sort of experience, whether it be firsthand or hearing about, leaves an indelible mark on you. So you have to know how to process that, so to be able to, sort of live your own life and get through the day.
Well, let me ask you this question, which I don't mean to put you on the spot. We didn't rehearse this at all, but regarding your concept of resilience, intuitively, just thinking about it from a distance, one would think that individuals who are trained, like first responders and therapists, might have a different level of resilience than individuals at the scene who experience the reality. What's your reaction to that concept?
I think that it actually depends, because resilience, it's not only something that is a learned process. Like, you could pick up a book and, maybe look at self-help qualities to build that up. But I also think that it's what we would call like a bioecological process. So people who are like hardy in nature, those folks whose family background also include you pick up your bootstraps and you just, sort of deal, or you muddle through. It's the same idea of like the British saying, keep calm and carry on. That sort of internal processing system that says, you're okay, you can get through this, and then you do, So it's, I think, both a learned and a natural tendency, and it comes together in that way. So you might be someone who your family maybe isn't one who's used to being resilient. Maybe things have happened consistently and you don't necessarily know how to deal with them. But if your community is resilient, you might be able to get some ego lending and strength from the community. Does that make sense? Or if you have someone,
absolutely. In fact,
who you can
you had that term community resilience in your materials here, and I was intrigued by what it might mean, because, and you explained it a little bit, but basically the community resilience is somewhat different than individual, in the sense that you have a group that's having a supportive reaction, or may not have a supportive reaction, but you have a group reaction nevertheless. Hopefully it's a resilient reaction, as opposed to an individual who's rather raw and exposed, I would think.
Right, that's correct. So in a community setting, it's the idea that even if you maybe don't have the tools to be able to manage on your own, that your community may be able to support you. So they would not only help you to survive, but to thrive in spite of a loss of a broad spectrum of system and resources. So to use, for example, the Katrina example, there was a parish called Plaquemines Parish that, when the initial response to evacuate came up, well, is again a poorer parish. They didn't, have a lot of other things that they could do and put together. So what they did was they used all the school buses to get everybody out. That was a community acting within itself to protect its inhabitants. So it just didn't depend on one person where it's every man for himself. And you may or may not have the skills and the wherewithal to, get where you need to get. It was a community protecting itself and helping each other. So, kind of a hand up, which I'm somebody who thinks more like, if it serves one of us, it serves all of us. Or if it serves all of us, it serves one of us. Maybe it's a little bit more of a sort of utopian thought, but, I want to help everybody on the grand scale and not just, look out for me. And that's what I think part of a community resilience response would look like.
Well, something I've noticed
more
too,
altruistic.
I'm a Midwest. Did you say something right there? I couldn't tell.
I just said it's more altruistic. So
Yes.
Pay it forward, that sort of idea.
Absolutely. And they have the larger picture in mind.
Yes.
I'm originally a Midwest boy. I was born in Philly and raised in the Midwest, Missouri and Indiana. And I always had the thought that the agrarian economy breeds a different individual regarding resilience. It always seemed to me that individuals who panicked while flying on airplanes, I mean, this is a gross overgeneralization, but just to talk about it, when the weather would come up, it seemed that those from intensely urban areas became much more frustrated with the weather and natural just weather, just the rain, which wouldn't be a catastrophe per se, but would be a change that you'd have to cope with, more so than individuals who were on the agrarian economy, who lived on farms, who were out there dealing with the weather every day. They just had a different kind of resilience to natural change.
Well, I think that's true. Part of it is cultural, as you sort of mentioned. So, for example, and this actually comes up in my research, the Midwest dealt with the Dust Bowl. And granted, that was ages ago. We're talking 90 years ago that the Dust Bowl happened. Yeah, just about 90. I think it was 1930. But that one experience of, well, we sort of just have to manage through. Another perfect example of that is like Oklahoma. Every year we see on TV these tornadoes rip through that area and destroy. And every year they just make it work. You don't hear a lot about like, well, we're going to not do anything here. We're going to leave it. It just, there's a way in which that they're just used to sort of like dealing with what comes and then getting through it, and pushing through. So I do believe, there's, in some areas, there's like a hardiness in some people that, maybe they aren't able to necessarily deal with the little life changes, but in part for them, their idea might be a little bit more, the kill or be killed. So they're looking at it as, I only can think about myself because if I don't think about myself, no one else will. Whereas, I'm more like, if we think about everybody, everyone will be okay. So it's a change in perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this then, and you alluded a little bit to the difference between individuals who are survivors and those who are primary victims. Could you elaborate on that difference a little bit so we can conceptualize what you're talking about there?
Yes, I think there is, and commonly you'll hear about people who see themselves more as survivors versus victims. So victims is sort of like where you're putting it on. It's you certainly did experience something, and it's definitely difficult. But what you find is there's more of like a vulnerability or fragility with a person who sort of sees or takes on the victimhood role. They are going to experience feelings that the people who are survivors have also experienced, times feeling helplessness, vulnerability, self-pity, defeat, shame, discouragement. They might feel really out of control and angry and hope that somebody comes and rescues them from their situation. They sort of are like, I don't know what to do. I just need somebody to help me,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a survivor to some degree has an ability to adapt to change. they may still feel some of these things, but they're not going to just be helpless about it. They're going to sort of accept their circumstances and then move forward from that. It's the idea that you are able to adapt to change. You're able to maybe see where you can find some footholds with folks you can depend on and find some support with, without little assistance from others. It's, sort of the ability to, you get bad news, for example, and it's like, okay, it doesn't like break you down where you are inconsolable for a period of time or you're not able to move. There's sort of, if you think about fight, flight, or freeze. So a victim is probably going to freeze. They're not going to really know what to do, and they may stay in the frozen area for a long time. Whereas a survivor is probably going to go into at least fight. They're going to say, okay, well, what can I do? What are my options? Because a lot of times once something is sort of done, you have to then just be able to recover from it.
Yeah, that's so well said. I at first thought there was a differentiation in terms of the way the individuals experienced the trauma, and that really is what it is. They had a certain mindset about the trauma from the beginning. They had a internal role that they're going to survive, which is obviously a more active role than a victim, which is a more passive role, and a sense of indecision and I can't do anything. Whereas an active person is, how are we going to let me give some orders and let's get started.
Right.
You'll enjoy
what can
the
I do?
video. I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you saying, please?
Yeah. It's the idea of like, well, what can I do? How can I, get where I need to get or get my needs met?
Well, the question is, can we train those individuals in your counseling, in your work, in your helping individuals rebuild their lives who've been traumatized at Sovereign Health? Can you actually help a person take on a more survival attitude about their life in the course of therapy?
I think you can. I think that the first thing that's really important is helping them to identify what they find meaning with. So how do they sort of foster their own strength? Because that speaks to their ability to either be optimistic or pessimistic. I would say I'm definitely an optimist, but I also like to call myself a determinist. It's going to turn out how I need it to, one way or the other. It's sort of like, my will be done. And it's also sort of, you think about one thing that was really popular a couple of years ago was The Secret. And that idea that if you put something in your mind and put it out into the world, that could very well happen for you. And it's sort of like, focused attention. So I do believe that there are things that you can do to change. So becoming a little bit more optimistic versus pessimistic. Changing our attitude of life on focusing on action, what you can do versus what you can't do, because, we can't dwell on what you can't do. If we're going to just marinate in that, then there's not a whole lot of action to be taken. Being aware of our emotional awareness, so what we're connected to and how it connects us, the control of ourselves, and what our response is to the circumstances. So, how we look at our own response and take that forward and really sort of change how we see things. This is where I think the part of the brain comes in, because, if you're familiar with, I quote it a lot, 7 Habits by Stephen Covey, talks about being an effective person in 7 habits. And in those habits, one thing my brother always says is it takes 21 days to make a habit, to form a habit. And we all know sort of, he didn't know because he's not, involved in any kind of neurobiology or psychology. But the background of that is that is your brain making new connections and developing those new connections over and over and over until that normal process is just there. Now we've built a new pathway, and that new pathway is what allows us to move forward and make changes in our life.
That's interesting. You're gonna love the video that I've got on the vets page at corebrainjournal.com/vets, VETS. And I took a video from a fellow named Jocko Willnick, who has a podcast called Jocko Podcast. And he was the SEAL commander for all of the SEAL teams on the West Coast. He was in chief of training for all the SEAL teams on the West Coast. And he Bronze Star, Silver Star, 2 tours in Iraq. Very interesting guy, very bright guy. And he's got a video there that I just think is exceptionally accurate regarding this conversation that we're having. And the name of the video is Good. And I would tell everybody to go listen to it because he does it so much more appropriately and effectively than I could. But he basically tells the story of somebody coming to him with a problem, which in a way, if the person's coming with a problem, they're already in a I can't handle it, I'm a victim mode. And what Jocko says to him, and the fellow knows this when he's talking to Jocko says, good. That is a good thing. Now, here's how you turn it into a benefit, and you will love it because it's humorous, but it's deadly serious at the same time in terms of your survival, the survival of your team, survival of your companions, and some of what you're talking about here might be apropos for your crew, wherever they are.
Absolutely. Well, and even just like looking at or considering that person. So he was the head of a SEAL team. So here are people that are sent in, to do a job, and they have the hardest jobs. And, it's an elite team, and they know that a lot of what they have to do is going to be very difficult. It could cost them their life. It could cost, most certainly will cost some other lives that, maybe are required. But they have to come into that, to some degree being an optimist, saying, we are going to be able to do this, and no one's going to tell us otherwise. I imagine that his response to a problem is really, well, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. So let's see what we can do with that opportunity.
Yeah, you will definitely like that one. So you mentioned a moment ago brain function, and it sounds a little bit like you were saying, without saying it explicitly, something about neuroplasticity and forming new pathways in terms of how a person actually copes with different realities. So instead of saying, I can't get this reality and I can't deal with it, they go into it and they continue to go into it until they actually can, in fact, master the reality.
Right. So I was speaking I didn't say the word plasticity, but that's actually accurate. Resilience is not a passive process. It is what we do to figure out the answer to a question. It's like you said, or actually I guess like I said, looking at it not as a problem, but as an opportunity. So since it is an active process, it builds new neural pathways. It helps to, build upon itself to start to form good habits and better habits. This is where I was kind of saying that you can learn this process, because when patients come into me, for example, in either this setting or in my private practice setting, I'm not just doing advice giving. I'm saying, well, what do you think about that? Well, what do you think? What do you want to do about it? What have you tried to do about it? So I'm asking for them to build pathways and seek their own answers, because that way they are learning through, even if it's a mistake, if it takes them down a detour that they didn't mean to, they're learning something. And in that learning, they're building resilience.
I couldn't agree with you more. I wrote a book a long time ago called Deep Recovery, How to Use Your Most Difficult Relationships to Find Out Who You Are. Mm-hmm. And my point in the book, there were several points, but one of them was understanding a sense of balance and really have a cautionary note about hearing yourself talk so that you could actually hear the victim words as a victim and know how counterproductive it was for your actual conceptualization of the problem at hand. Now, Jocko was saying good, which is a reframe. It's a reframe. To say there's a problem, good, that's a reframe. But what I found in counseling and working with individuals back when I did more counseling is I would just stop. I'd say, hold it right there. Stop right there. Did you hear what you said? And I'd get them reprogrammed. So, because they would actually be running themselves down in one way or another, or emphasizing their incapacity, inaccurately emphasizing their incapacity, and then remaining in a stuck position by proclaiming victimhood without even being aware of it, because they saw themselves as mensch, managing, they could handle themselves, strong people. Interestingly.
Right. They're reinforcing their victimhood.
Yeah.
So in the same way that you can reinforce and be optimistic, you can reinforce and sort of, put on the poor me. And I think that sometimes people do. And it's important to understand also that when we think about victimhood, there are sometimes certain people or certain situations where it can be very difficult to sort of work your way out of. And there's something called victim syndrome, where it's a learned behavior in some, but also a personality trait. So it's a lot of times it can be about accountability. I always like to think about what was my part in something, if you had something happen to you that was a terrible situation, are you considering what you did or how you could have participated in it, that maybe moving forward, you wouldn't necessarily do that? Do you always blame other people for certain things? Do you blame your misfortunes on others? But everybody has accountability in whatever has happened in their lives. I mentioned early on that I just lost one of my animals. Well, what I didn't say is for 2 years, I cared for this dog who couldn't walk, and I wheeled her around in my office in a cart, and I did everything that I could for her until I couldn't do anymore, and
yes.
I know what my part in that was, and I was willing to go so far until, it became where it was apparent we had to make a change, and we had to, do what we had to do with her. But outside of that, she was resilient and I was resilient, because I was definitely trying to make a path and make a way, to keep her happy and healthy as much as possible, up until the point where, you have to make the tough decision.
Now, I'm going to ask you a deep question, because that's a very personal moment right there, and listeners can really easily identify with you and empathize with the difficulty that you felt. Now, for a moment, take us back to your, if you will, corporate responsibility, your training responsibility. How does one actually build that kind of cognitive awareness into a program for people? Do you have a system for it? How does, that's probably too large a question, but if you could give me a little bit of a hint on that, I'm sure listeners would be interested.
Well, I think at least for Sovereign, we start from a place of, we do ask the tough questions, and we tend to look at things from both a neurobiological or neurophysiological place, as well as from, a talking end. Where is somebody in their stages of readiness for treatment? So we utilize a lot of motivational interviewing, which I think keys into where people are trying to be resilient or whether they're not. It sort of, questions their ability or their readiness to make a change and be resilient. Mm-hmm. So we do that. I think for me, I really like to be more of a personable person. What you see is what you get. And when things are tough, I certainly connect to my, strong friends, strong family, my pillars, as it were, mm-hmm. My anchors, actually, that's the word I think I was thinking of, to be able to help support me in something. But then, we have to move through things. So it's not necessarily taking away, and it's not the idea of getting over something, because even though, that loss happened, it doesn't mean that I'm over it or that I've forgotten about her. It's just the way in which we sort of process and almost have to move through something. You feel it, but you also take care of the things that you need to take care of. And that part of that is yourself, because I can't just sit at home wrapped in a blanket watching old dog videos. I have to work. I have to, be in the land of the living. I think this comes up a lot with loss.
With what
did you say?
Any
Loss, like any sort of loss. So
loss,
a loss
yes.
loss of a friend, loss of a family member, loss of like a marriage. We tend to get mired in, the feelings that, of maybe what might have been or what, we have to maybe use a little bit more mindfulness about like the here and now. And what are we going to do to move forward if we think that there is still a way through to maybe either if the person's still alive to get that person back or to, connect to them. Great. We make those attempts. If they're not, and it's a loss like a death, well, what can we do? We can, hold them in esteem. We can do things in their honor. We have to sort of think of things through that lens
Mm-hmm.
and, move through the grief process and become, not just sit sort of stagnant and not do anything. And I interestingly use that word because if you think about parts of New Orleans, there are parts of New Orleans that aren't fixed, that look the same as if it happened a month ago. And then there are parts of New Orleans that are, remodeled, that are revitalized. And so you have, sort of these things at war with each other in their own city. And I don't necessarily know that it's specific to, these people cared and these people didn't care. I think that just unfortunately some communities were able to be a little bit more resilient or, were able to pull together a little bit more to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things I found interesting, about that study is that, for all the people that wanted to stay, you had a number of people that left too. And, the stories that I heard were very interesting in their attempts to be resilient. One man, I don't know if you remember, there was a bridge that people were trying to cross over, and the law enforcement of the neighboring city or parish, they wouldn't allow them in. So this guy and his family actually climbed into like a sparkless water truck into the water bays and got smuggled in that way. That's a resilient person. He was like, I'm getting out.
Yeah.
Not, whatever way I need to make a way, this is the way. I'm getting out. You know what I mean? And, for him, that's what he did to take care of his family. So, it's no negative against anybody who didn't.
Yeah.
They were maybe in a position or a place, whether it be physically, emotionally, that they couldn't do that. But it's looking at the whole of how do we, sort of come together, and how do we internally bring ourselves together to be able to do more and to get where we need to get.
Yeah. How do we collectively solve the problem? Well, I'm looking at the time. Dr. Monica Powers, thank you so much for a very, very interesting tour through a word which really a lot of us know the word, but didn't really think as completely as we did here today on resilience. I think it's a very interesting concept, very useful and very helpful to a lot of people out there to start thinking about taking a more proactive, positive, how do we live on, how do we move forward, and recognize that victim challenge that they have, or that they might have. So tell us a little further as we wind up here, where are the two websites that you'd like to have us connect with you, if you will, please?
So you can connect with me first and foremost through Sovereign Health. If you're interested in any additional information, you're welcome to find my bio and information on Sovereign Health. I do and have done a few other speaking engagements, most specifically on this topic, as well as on the self-care, which is my other close to my heart topic, because I think that that's so important. So sovereignhealth.com or sovhealth.com. You can also find me in private practice at carlsonassociates.com. It's a practice in the Pasadena area.
Is it CARLSON?
CARLSON, yes. And associates.com.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And I do have a Facebook page. I have a Dr. Powers Psychotherapy Facebook page, which I post on about, interesting topics in the mental health community. And it connects to my private practice as well.
That's great. I'll find those and put them in the show notes. Thank you so much, Dr. Powers, for coming on board. It was really fun talking to you. Very interesting. And thank the team out there at Sovereign Health. They've really been very constructive for our audience, and we really appreciate their taking the time and helping us move further along the way ourselves.
Thank you. We appreciate you as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this subject. I think it's really important.
It so much is. Thanks for listening to Core Brain Journal. We're working every day behind the scenes to bring you reports that connect research benches with those street trenches. Here we share the complexity of mind science because, as you know, details really do matter. One of the most pervasive, misunderstood challenges is how commonplace medications, like those written for ADHD, are used so regularly without clear guidelines. If you think you'd like more specifics, take a minute to download my 2-page PDF packed with video links and references on the absolute essentials of how to start ADHD medications. They're easily available at corebrainjournal.com/start. Thanks for listening. Do connect and stay tuned. Together we can make a difference.